Hi, this is Aaron Azrod, and welcome to the 156th episode of the Truth Island podcast. Over the past 18 months of the pandemic, many of the things that we held to be absolutely true have slowly begun to show signs of weakening. If one were to travel back in time to, let's say, 2017 and ask random people on the street what they felt were the most important things in life, they would probably give some generic answers such as money, family, career, health, etc. However, in many respects, the things that we once cherished are starting to show cracks. For instance, what is the point in having the perfect body if no one is ever around to see you? What good is money if you don't use it to help benefit others, but only to satiate your own gluttonous appetite for more material goods? Even something such as power itself is starting to become obsolete. As what exactly is the point in occupying a high office if the people underneath you don't believe or respect you? What's worse is that many of our politicians and influencers are not speaking their mind, but rather are speaking the words in which they think people want to hear. In the words of William Shakespeare, the world's a stage and we are all actors. It's almost as if Shakespeare was thinking of 2021 when he coined that phrase, as when one closely examines the people around them, one sees nothing but actors. For instance, actors are constantly thinking about how the audience is going to react to their character, much the same way that everyone else is concerned about how others perceive them. This ranges from what they wear to the words that come out of their mouth. It can be said that humans that live solely for how they appear before others have long since stopped being human and have unknowingly become actors in a play that they never signed up for. Joining me to help break out a character, I am once again joined by my castmate, Kenny. Kenny, let me start by asking you, do you think that this play called Life is a comedy or a tragedy?
I think it's a bit of both, mate. Comedy is in the sense that a lot of good things happen. Uh, Often, you get the right job, you meet the right person, get married, you have kids. People who turned their back on you or doubted you sometimes change their minds. People get lucky and their lives turn out pretty well. And then tragedy. I mean, at the end of the day, every single one of us is going to die. You know, every single one of us, and we're all going to die once one way or the other. Some of us are going to be, it's going to be through just awful, painful disease, and some of us are going to be horrible car accidents. Some of us is just everybody dies pathetically, man. We lose beyond death. We lose people lose limbs. People lose loved ones. People lose their jobs. Lose their life savings. Lose their investments. People don't know who they are. So there's a lot of tragedy too. So I think it's a mixture. It's an interesting mixture of comedy and tragedy.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of it also comes down to perception. I think that sometimes, it's interesting because I was telling my girlfriend just yesterday, I said sometimes like the scariest moments in your life make for the greatest stories a few years later. Like in that moment, you're scared shitless, but a few years later, it makes for an excellent story. I want to kind of talk about us as being actors and perhaps maybe following some delusions. And now I think death is a great way in sort of exposing the delusions very quickly. I think when death is off the table, I mean, I think when where it's never off the table, but sometimes in other instances in life, it's further off it's further away from us, right? So when death is further away from us, it allows us to kind of play up our delusions a lot more. So we're able to kind of be like we're able to create controversy out of nothing, right? So if I'm not worried about death, and I walk into a department store and something is not 20% off, or I didn't get the right sale, or this shirt didn't come in the color that I wanted, my day is ruined. You ever hear these people that say, my day was ruined because it rained, or my day was ruined because I didn't get that thing on sale, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of think our life was a bit more like, I'm not saying for everybody, obviously there's people in parts of the world that, death is a real and present danger. But I think for a lot of us in the developed world, death is so far removed from our existence that we were kind of creating these false tragedies or these false reasons to be upset. We were getting upset over trivial nonsense when in actuality it was really nothing. I'm wondering, like, if this is something that like is just temporary, or do you think that we're going to keep pushing closer to actually, evaluating what really means anything in this world? Or are we gonna, as soon as the threat of death just kind of evaporates, we're gonna go back to like nitpicking, why this thing wasn't on sale, or why that pasta dish I ordered at the restaurant was a little cold?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, the idea that the question of if this life is, if we're all actors and if we're living in like a delusion, is, I think it's a very good question. It's a very valid one, man. I was actually talking to someone about this 2 nights ago. A friend had a good friend of mine had introduced me to a friend of his. This guy was very interesting, and he, one of the things he kept talking about, and one of the things that he kept that made me, I would say that he would say made him who the kind of person he is, and he's a very interesting guy. Said that it was the desire to know what is true, the desire to know what is factual, what is true. And people talk about that a lot, but they only want to know what's true when it's beneficial to them, and don't really know what's true if it's going to be detrimental or in any way inconvenience, and in any way an inconvenience to their life. But I think Shakespeare was right, Mike. This life is like a stage, and we certainly treat it that way. I mean, the way we're always sending signals to one another, always we have a certain persona that we want others to see us, we want others to measure us by. The way we dress, the things we say, the movies we watch, the books we read, and our desire to inform people about those things we do in private. It's really about sending a message that we hope will be beneficial to us. Nobody wants to go around, making enemies and being misunderstood. I think we all want to be understood, and we all want to, even if it's not really who we are, we all want to have a projection where we want to project something, how we would like to be perceived. I mean, it starts at a very young age, and so I agree. I think, but beyond that, that's pretty superficial, because I mean, we have to wear clothes, right? I mean, some might argue, some might say, no, Kenny, we don't. But I mean, if we're living in a society, a civilized society, then we have to wear clothes. But there's a different side of it. There's a different side to this delusion. There's a different side to the acting that becomes a bit more dangerous. I was watching this commercial yesterday, and it was, this guy flies in on a spaceship. Very handsome young man. It's obviously a model. Very handsome young man flies in on a spaceship to this awesome space party. There's an alien playing the drums, and there's
space party.
Space party, man. There's an alien playing the drums. There's people, very beautiful people dancing all around, and they're all dressed in this futuristic, outfits. And the young man sees a very beautiful young lady across the room, walks up to her, and he takes her hand, and they walk off, and they get into his space car, and they fly away. And in the middle, interspersed between these scenes is a dancing robot, very small robot, very cute dancing robot. And at the end of the commercial, you find out that it's just a commercial for cologne. And the first thing I do is, I roll my eyes instinctively, like, oh brother. But I see, I check myself. It's like, really, what am I rolling my eyes about? I'm rolling my eyes because it's just, I'm tired of commercials personally. But it's specific, this kind of commercial. It's, these kinds of, people say, no, it's just artistic expression. Well, sure, maybe. I mean, don't tell me that, that company spends millions of dollars creating this commercial for artistic expression. No, they know what they're doing. They are signals. There's marketing is not art. there's a system, there's a system to it, but it's not art. You can say, well, the art of marketing, sure, you can say the art of anything, the art of pooping, the art of pissing, whatever you want to call it, art of whatever, but it's not art. There's a science behind it. There's a strategy, and the strategy is to get you to do something. And usually it's bending reality. What they're trying to do is they're trying to take parts of reality that usually don't mix. That usually they enhance something. So you have this party with incredibly gorgeous people doing these fun things, playing with, interacting with an alien species and its cute dancing robot. And they've created this environments where they're larger than life, where that's from the viewer's perspective, this is where they ought to be. This is where they want to be. They want to be that beautiful. They want to be that engaged. They want to be surrounded with that kind of adventure and experience. And so then they point to this robot, and it's supposed to be a very luxurious item because that commercial it's a luxurious, it had a luxurious feel to it, right? And so it's like, you're being, if you a small man, middle class man, lower middle class man, buys this perfume, behold, you are now in the big leagues. You are like the gods. You are like the gods who play guitar with aliens. You know what I mean? And it's manipulative, of course, but it's our world operates this way. You see it. I mean, delusions are everywhere. And it's often in our television sets that we see them, often we hear them on the radio and so forth. But I do believe that there is absolutely, we're living in a very delusional world on many fronts.
Okay, I'm really glad that you took this into the down the path of commercialism, because I think commercialism is the most obvious example of this. And let's look at that perfume, or I think this also happens a lot with skincare commercials. Okay, look 20 years younger and so forth, right? And it's gotten to the point now where they're not just telling you, like a lot of these skincare stuff, they're not just telling you you'll look younger. They're saying if you don't do this, your skin might be at risk, or your flesh is at risk almost. It's like they're taking it even further to a point where it's not even just a question of like, look your best. It's a question of like, you will not live without this product and so forth. And I think that's a case point of the grand delusion, because there are two facts that I learned when I was in middle school that actually transformed my life. Okay. And the first of which is, if you go, a human being can go up to 30 days just drinking water. Okay. So if you're just drinking water, you can survive up to 30 days. And then a human being can live for about 3 to 4 days without food or water. Okay. And those are like just absolute fact, right? Like, so if you go more than 3 days with no food and water, you'll die. If you go more than 30 days without drinking any water, you'll die. And those are like absolute truths. Like, okay, this is the bare minimum. This is the bare minimum that is needed in order to stave off death. Like, death is the ultimate truth. And, food and water is what's required to kind of prevent the ultimate truth from just happening tomorrow. Everything else, though, is a part of the delusion of you need this. You need this to be a part of society. You need this to be happy. You need this in order to live. And I think commercialism is where this absolutely happens the most. And I think it's at a breaking point now where it's starting to create strife and conflict and depression, where there need not be strife, conflict, and depression. Because if human beings just kept in the back of their mind, okay, I just need food and water and shelter, assuming you're living in a climate where it gets really cold or something and you could freeze to death, all right? So food, water, and shelter. I think we actually have the potential to be happy when we realize just how little it is that we actually need in order to survive. I think the unhappiness starts coming when we start falling victim to these delusions and start believing that we need more to exist than what we actually do need.
Well, yeah, don't get me wrong. I think it's perfectly fine to buy that expensive perfume and be content with it. The problem is not the perfume. The problem is not buying the perfume. The problem is why you think you ought to buy that perfume. I like what you said there about needing. Why do you think you need it? we often think that we often believe that we think for ourselves, and that's just not the case. A lot of the time, if the average human being sits down and thinks through why he believes what he or she believes, they'll find out that it's either because their parents taught them that, the teachers taught them that, they heard it on the news, they saw it in a film, they read it in some book. Critical thinking, personal thinking for one's own self is just not what we do. We feel often we feel things, and we equate feeling with thinking. It's not the same thing at all. Or we equate having thoughts in our head with thinking. That's not the same thing at all. It's very unique. When you meet them, you know. It's very unique to find individuals who have thought through things out for themselves. Doesn't necessarily mean they're always right, but it's impressive. It's impressive because there's about 7 billion people in the world, right? And population is always growing. About 7 billion people in the world, and among the 7 billion people, you find that we're all pretty much alike. Generally, we all behave in the same way, especially when it comes to doing evil. We're all pretty bad. Like a bad man in China looks the exact same as a bad man in America. There's just no difference. If it's gonna beat his wife, he's gonna beat his wife. He's gonna beat the crap out of his kids. He's gonna drink all day and all night. He's gonna do that. He's gonna steal from his company. It's the same thing. There's no difference in our expression of wickedness and evil. But what's interesting is when you find individuals who begin to, who begin to think for themselves amongst the 7 billion. And there's not much. When you find them, it's interesting because they become outliers in the sense of everybody's going left and jumping from one bridge to the other, or jumping, making a certain move repeatedly, and it's been going on for ages. And this poor schmuck, for one reason or the other, decides to not go with, to not go with the flow, finds himself alone. When the general population are often being run and being coerced and being manipulated and being told what to believe by the media. It's usually the media and their own, group of friends who, often reaffirm and reassure one another. And what happens is we build these castles of untruth. Not doesn't mean that everybody believes what everybody believes is complete delusion. No, I'm just saying that we hold certain and strong delusional ideas. We hold things dear to us, things that inform our lives, things that inform our futures, our kids' futures, that just aren't true or just aren't necessary. And it's hard to remove those things from one's own life. But it's always pleasant to meet when you find somebody who is actively thinking, actually judging and questioning the things they encounter in the world.
Wow, I think there's actually a very, very profound insight that you just hammered in what you just said. And that is, so let's take the perfume commercial for a second. Is there anyone watching television that literally thinks they're going to die if they don't spray this perfume on their body? Probably not, right? Like no one actually thinks they're going to die. But what actually gets people away from the truth is the threat of social isolation. I think that people are smart enough to know that they won't die, but so they're afraid of social stigma and social isolation, and that in itself is a form of death, right? Like the man who's been completely cast out from society, he's not physically dead, but socially he's dead. And I'll give you an example of this. Take something like male deodorant. If you look at, the 17th, 18th, 19th century, most men probably did not wear deodorant. Do you think like the average Civil War soldier cared about putting on deodorant? Do you think that the American Revolution soldier cared about like putting on deodorant? No. So like, if you were a man and you were living during these times, you were still allowed to be a part of society, whether you put on deodorant or did not put on deodorant. No one gave two craps. And the reason why people didn't give a crap whether you wore deodorant or not is because everyone was like hungry, starving. Like you had you had real problems that you had to contend with. So no
Yeah.
one was going to be like, no, 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 sir, you can't enter here. You didn't put deodorant. But compare that to like the 20th century, or the late 20th century, 21st century. Now you're a guy, you walk into an office with no deodorant, everyone has been like, oh God, you stink, you smell, man. So basically, if you do not perform this ritual, you will be socially isolated from the herd, and that in itself is a form of death. Because I think people actually afraid being people fear being exiled or ostracized more than actual death itself. I think that people are more afraid that they're going to be cast out as a leper amongst their community than actually going 6 feet under. And
Yeah.
I think that's how we all become actors. So I think what happens is that we realize if we tell the truth, we're not going to be invited to parties. We're not going to have friends anymore. And it's not that we don't know what the truth is. It's just that fear of being socially isolated forces us to go along with the herd, even if the herd is all believing in falsehoods. Whereas when you said that there's so few men that actually think critically, I think that every man has the ability to think critically or think for himself, but you have to be brave enough to face the wrath of social isolation. I think that's I think that's the difference maker. I don't think it's actually, the neurons in your brain or your cognitive ability. I think you just have to be brave enough to think for yourself and be open that you think for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, it's let's just say it doesn't really win you any popularity awards, and you're going to be weird for a while. Especially depends on how young you are. Usually when young people begin to think for themselves and figure things out, they're very vocal about it. They want to. It usually comes from a very good place, and they end up getting crucified. It's certainly not going to win you any good things, except for, I mean, the only person I know doing this right now that is just fantastically working out well for him, and it has a lot to do with his attitude, but the sheer brilliance of his mind is just incredibly helpful too. Is Jordan Peterson. This guy says things that, I mean, he should have been crucified years ago. I mean, this guy should have been crucified years ago. But for one reason or the other, he survived. Now that doesn't mean he doesn't have his critics. It just means he has a lot of people who are rooting for him. Yeah, I think it's a very unusual place to be where you start thinking for yourself, and people actually kind of find you endearing when you speak the truth, and you're actually admired for it. It's a very unusual place to be.
So I also have a lot of respect for Jordan Peterson, and I think our society needs more mavericks such as him. And it doesn't matter what your opinions are, whatever, just independent thought. Like, I love people who think independently, whether they're on the right or whether they're on the left. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care if you're a leftist or a rightist or whatever you are. If your thought is pure and independent, I actually have a tremendous level of respect for you. If your thought was formulated by reading really obscure books that no one really talks about anymore, and your thoughts were formulated by taking 10-hour walks by yourself, in a park, I actually have a lot of respect for you just by virtue of the fact that you see, when you come up with your own independent thoughts, you can explain them in such a simple way because you have the highest level of understanding of them. Like because when you hear somebody who hasn't formulated their own thoughts, you ask them a simple, they'll tote the line, right? They'll tote the line. You ask them one follow-up question. What happens if this happens? Or suppose this happens? And then it's like, right? Like they just fade away because you can tell that that person is just regurgitating something that they heard. And they actually haven't taken a 10-hour walk to actually think about the thought themselves at a deep level.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
this is where you find out if your thinker is a part of the herd or whether they are a true giant, you know, if they're a giant amongst giants. Okay, is that you ask them a few follow-up questions, and if they break down and they can't answer those follow-up questions, that's a problem. And look, man, I have actually met professors. I've met people with PhDs. I ask them a simple follow-up question, they can't answer it. And I'm like, you know, like, because they are so lost in their own they're so lost in their talking points, or so lost in their own mantra, that if you ask them one question that challenges their beliefs, they're unable to answer it. That means they have not, even though they have a doctorate, they haven't grappled with these thoughts at the highest level. They memorized the things that they needed to memorize, so they have good rote learning, memorization, but they haven't taken 10-hour walks and actually thought about these concepts independently at a very high level. And that is a huge problem with our society. As to your point about like being crucified for being an independent thinker, I think you're absolutely right. If you dare break free from the herd, you will be attacked, and you will actually. I think if you break free from the herd, the first thing that will happen to you is no one just pays attention to you. Like, you know,
it's when you come back and start saying things, you know, saying things that you dare not say.
Yeah.
Then you know, it's usually when you start costing people money.
Exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's when you start costing them money, and for the average man, convenience.
Yes.
You are no longer this cute little puppy that should be, you know, oh, aren't you cute, this little guy? Yeah, little guy saying big things, huh? You're no longer this cute little puppy. Now you've become this, you know, this entity that needs to be eradicated. But of course, that's, I know it sounds dramatic. It sounds like, oh my goodness, what are you saying? No, but it's true. Eventually, in one way or the other, there's nobody who tells you the truth, and that is actually true. That does well. It just doesn't happen.
Well, so in order to be perceived as a threat, you need to have considerable reach, right? So you and I speaking the truth is not really much of a threat because we don't have necessarily that broad reach, and we're not costing anyone money, right? Because our reach. So I think you have to, in order to be deemed a threat, you would need to have a considerable base or a considerable reach, because then you start costing people money when actually a significant portion. It doesn't have to be the majority, by the way. It could be something as low as 20 to 30% of the population starts believing in your ideas, then you're actually labeled a threat. So I think that you have to do two things. You have to, one, speak the truth, and two, have a considerable enough reach that you're, as you said, costing other people money, or costing them their reputation or their fame or their power, or whatever it is that they feel threatened by. I think there's so many obstacles in order to achieve this, because one, you do face like localized exclusion, right? Like, you know, you're not in your immediate circle, you're not saying the things that everyone else is saying, right? And that bothers them because you're challenging their personal identity, right? When you ask, like, you know, I ask a lot of what if questions, like, what if this happens? What if that happens, right? And people find that really annoying, you know, and I always wondered, well, why do they
tell you this, Aaron?
You know, it's like, you know, it's like Socrates says, an annoying gadfly, right? And I asked myself that question, well, why don't people like all these what if questions? And I realized that the reason they don't like these what if questions is because it challenges their personal identity, and it challenges their power. It's as simple as that. It's not that they don't intellectually want to roll around in the mud. It's just they know that there's a good chance that this what if question can bring them down. It could very well bring them down, because they're going to be caught with their pants down, and they're going to be caught, you know, they're going to be locked into a corner, and they're not going to have the answer. And this could be the one little Jenga piece that you pull out, and then the whole tower comes crumbling on down.
Yeah.
And we gotta get past this, because there's a lot of intellectual dishonesty that's going on, because people are too they're too much of they're too there's too much cowardice that is preventing people from actually grappling with themselves and grappling of whether the things that they believe are true or whether they're false. I was listening just this morning, just before we got on, there was this YouTuber I was listening to, and he said, yeah, I don't really like debating people. People just prefer for me to get on my channel and say what it is that I believe. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like what kind of intellectual cowardice is this, where it's like you want to just get on your YouTube channel and speak your truth unchallenged, unchallenged, and people are eating this up. And I'm like, that's not what people should be eating up. People should be eating people should be eating up the sparring, or that, what that's the equivalent, the equivalent of a YouTuber just getting on their channel and talking for 45 minutes is the equivalent of a UFC fighter fighting a punching bag. And would you pay money to see a UFC fighter fight a punching bag, Kenny? Would you pay money for that?
Yeah, was this punching bag interesting? No, it was not.
Like, imagine you've got a UFC fight and you got the octagon or wherever it is that they fight in, and there's one guy there's one guy in the corner, and then in the other corner there's just a chain. There's a punching bag, dangling from a chain from the ceiling, and for 20 minutes the guy just punches and kicks that punching bag, and the UFC is charging $69.95.
My money's on the punching bag.
But that's what our society has become. It's basically become, these alpha male YouTube gorillas that go on their channel for 45 minutes speaking the truth. But God forbid they allow another intellectual heavyweight fighter into the ring with them, that could actually tear, because they're afraid that if they put some other guy that's just as smart as they are, their whole worldview can be destroyed. Whereas I love that. I love the challenge. I love having intellectual heavyweights come down and tear me to pieces, because when they tear me down to pieces, I'm going to incorporate what they've taught me and build myself up to be stronger.
Well, that makes sense, and it's a certain kind of maturity. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who he had told me that he was kicked off of a Twitch stream. I don't know if you know Twitch. Twitch is a video game social platform.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
So he had subscribed, paid about $5 to watch this guy play a certain game, and because he really liked a certain game and he wanted to learn a bit more about it. It's a card game, and he was watching the guy, and apparently on these streams, people can ask questions or leave comments, and it just keeps scrolling and so forth, right? So somebody says something to the guy about a comment he had made, and the guy banned him. He just immediately banned him, and he started giving the spew that the owner of the Twitch stream, the game player, banned the commentator. And my friend was watching this, and he immediately responded to the guy saying, "Hey, what are you doing? You don't just ban people for saying things that you don't agree with. And that's not right. Plus, he paid money to be here. Why would you ban him?" I would like to tell you that the Twitch streamer said, "You know what? I that was true." No, my friend got banned too. So the idea is that
Wait, what happened? Say that again.
My friend got banned
as well. Okay, so this guy bans someone who and this guy who made this comment just said in a polite way, like, "Hey, last week you said this," or something like that, and he gets banned. And then someone says, "Hey, why did you ban that guy?" And then that guy gets banned. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Oh, wow.
And so that's very interesting, because it's that's the world in a nutshell, in the sense of that's our society. One of the most beautiful things about America is that you could speak, say things, communicate, talk. I mean, that's why there was no. It would have been. We were so different from Nazi Germany in the sense that the American myth was still alive, And right now, this whole thing is, we're talking about delusions. There's certain places where you can't even question the delusions anymore. You can't even ask questions to enlighten. You can't ask questions to challenge anything that may seem or actually is problematic and contrary to what we see in reality. Because you get banned, church, no consequence. You lose $5, right? You get banned, you lose $5, you don't see the video. That's fine. But in many places, many cases, you lose your job.
I think even losing that $5 is not right either.
It's not right.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not right. And I think we as a society are also responsible for this as well, because no one actually calls out these people. You see, the problem is that a lot of these influencers are basically following what the public wants. So in now I'm like in some that, yes, they are guilty.
If you follow the public, you follow the money.
Exactly.
You follow the public, you're following the money.
Yeah, exactly. They're following the public in order to make money. And what I think needs to happen is that the public needs to wisen up and say, no, we're not going to just follow some guy who's acting like a demigod and just goes on the channel and speaks, he just drops the truth for 45 minutes. We actually want to hear high caliber, high intelligent debate. I actually want to hear my speakers admit that they're wrong. I want them to revise their ideas. I want to see them grow stronger. I want to see progress. I want to be able to ask in the chat any question that I want to. And I want the person, leading that Twitch channel or whatever to address that problem. Or if they can't address that problem, to admit that
they can't.
Yeah, at least admit, hey man, that's a great question. I actually don't have the answer to that. Or wow, you've actually changed my mind on that. I want to see that kind of behavior. And I think the public needs to be instructed on how to be, a more intelligent consumer of truth and a more intelligent consumer of knowledge. Because I think it goes into, I think it's partly genetic. I think that especially with us men, okay, us men like strong alpha male gorillas that go in there and just like, have these, so-and-so destroys college student, or, like we are like, we like these like strong men type figures that go in there, they drop like the truth, like a nuclear explosion, and everyone's head is just blown off. And I think we need to overcome that, that's like an evolution, that's an evolutionary trait. We need to overcome that and be like, no, that alpha male gorilla that's dropping truth is not actually speaking the truth. The guy who's actually speaking the truth revises his or her opinions over time, admits when they're wrong, and sort of recalibrates themselves every so often. And we need to actually just retrain our mind in order to recognize that that's what the truth looks like, not some guy just dropping the mic and walking off stage.
Well, yeah, I mean, but here's the thing though, even the people who are, let's just say the alpha male, grotesque behavior, whatever it may be, he's speaking, even if he's speaking the truth, he's speaking the truth. Just because his manners may be unacceptable, or not even unacceptable, but disliked in general, but doesn't mean that what he's saying isn't true. As long as, see, my general thing is, it doesn't, if the wrong person says the right thing, it doesn't make that right thing wrong. But the idea is that it's to train one's own mind to forget about the peripherals, because the person's character is peripheral. If it's true, I don't care if it comes from Mother Teresa or Christopher Hitchens. If it's true, it's true. If it's true, it's true. We don't. It becomes very dangerous when we judge the message by the messenger. Now, I'm not saying that the character is important, because it reveals the credibility of the person, but people can lie. People can pretend. We're all actors. So it's important to train yourself simply to recognize what is true.
Now, I entirely agree with you. You can be a very vicious person and still speak truth. I 100% agree with what you're saying. Here's the turning point. If you're a very aggressive alpha male, vicious, I drop the truth, and that's your persona, and you're still speaking truth, fair enough. However, when a challenger comes along on Twitch or in some other capacity, you better open up the cage and allow that person in and actually debate them and actually tear down each of their counterpoints piece by piece. And that's the part where I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing
Yeah.
I'm seeing these people speak quote unquote the truth, and they're beating their chest, and it sounds awesome. And again, there might be truth sprinkled into into their bravado. Okay, and then and in fairness, there always is some truth sprinkled into that bravado, but when a challenger comes along, they either ignore that challenger's email, they ban them from the chat, like you just described with the Twitch example. And I'm seeing a lot more of that. I'm seeing a lot more of that where there's some powerful challengers, and they're not properly defending their belief system when a proper
Yeah.
challenger comes along. That's what I think is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of these guys don't, they don't care. It's really, it's all about the money, the status, and the power over the people, the individuals. And we're living in a time when debating or having even a civil conversation or debating either way is not generally accepted. And so there are still those who have the platform and who present the opportunity, but it's not a norm. It's not a common thing anymore. And what you do have is this totalitarian, dominating kind of attitude, or very sheepish and cowardly attitude towards dialogue and towards hearing the other side and so forth.
You know what's interesting, man? When I think of one of the biggest truth tellers of all time, Socrates, there's something I notice about Socrates. I notice that all of his dialogues are just that. They're dialogues, they're conversations. Like, when you have the works of Socrates, it's not just Socrates writing his thesis for 50 pages saying this is how the universe works. It's Socrates talking to some other dude who's saying, well, what about this, Socrates? Or how come the Athenians do this and that, right? So I find it kind of strange that one of our biggest truth tellers of all time spoke the truth in dialogue with other people who were actively trying to tear him down. They were actively trying to poke holes in his theories. So if that is the exemplar, if the biggest truth teller of all time spoke the truth by means of the dialectic or by means of conversing with others, then I think that should become the universal standard with how we judge truth. It's not truth in a vacuum, it's truth under the careful scrutiny of other people. And I think that's how we have to start retraining the mind. We need to start retraining the mind of, like, Socrates is the exemplar. He speaks the truth. And notice every sentence Socrates says, some other dude or dudes are attacking him. That's how you know that his truth is really robust, that he says this thing, and then he's got 5 different people attacking him and trying to refute him. And then basically the strongest man wins. Or it's like a battle royale. The strongest man is left in the ring. And he does so not because he says he's the strongest man, but because he's fairly won the competition.
Yes. And I think that is the nature of truth and conversation. And that's one of the helpful things about having friends, or even enemies, is the challenges, the refutes, and the attempted pokingsies of the holdingsies in the theory is very helpful. Very helpful, because not only does it strengthen our own position, but we also get to see it also builds, how you say, a confidence in what we hold. And it's I would say that's a good place to be.
Okay, I want to get back to this idea of us being actors and us living in delusions. And I think what I'm gonna do with you, my friend, is I want to create a truth first aid kit. Truth first aid. Okay, so we're going to create a first aid kit of truth so that in case someone is having a lie heart attack, we can revive that person instantly. We have a what's it called? Defibrillator. I'm saying it wrong, right? My mispronunciation. There we go. We're going to have one of those that someone's having a lying heart attack. We're going to revive them and bring them back to life, to the truth.
All right.
All right. So I think that individuals who, I think there's some truth in individuals who are going against the grain and can answer, who are their thoughts seem independently contrived. Now, that doesn't mean, like, you can have independently contrived thoughts, but it could be a bunch of lies, like, oh, there's UFOs controlling us, right? So just because it's independently contrived doesn't mean it's the truth, but that's a good step, right? It's a good step if the person you're talking to is at least spouting ideas that seem original and seem independently contrived. How does that sound to you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And again, just because your thoughts are independent doesn't mean that it's the truth, but it's a step in the right direction. At least you're coming up with ideas that, are that of your own. The second thing is how open they are to scrutiny and to follow-up questions, what if questions, hypothetical. If someone goes up to them and says, suppose a group of people decided to do this, they better have an answer for it. How does it, right?
I think so. I think so because it's if you're not open to scrutiny, if you're not open to follow up questions, then what the hell are you doing? I mean, what's the point of all the crap you're saying? If we can't test it to make sure that it is in fact true, what do you care about? Do you care about it being true, or do you care about us just simply believing that you know what's true?
Yes. And also making sure that person, when the follow-up question is asked, make sure that person is actually addressing the tenets of that follow-up question and is not changing the subject or backpedaling or doing any of these other tricks. You have to be able, the audience has to be pretty intelligent and ask themselves, did this person actually answer the question, or did they give politicians speak and sort of divert attention elsewhere?
Man, I was just about to say, politicians, you're like, they're just, well, you're skilled, man. Skilled in doing that. It's amazing. It's amazing, bro. And they get away with it all the time.
Yes, yeah. But they also get away with it because the person asking the question doesn't say, you didn't answer my question. You didn't answer my question. You didn't answer my question. Like the person asks.
You'd have to say it 1,000 times. You'd have to say it the amount of times in an interview that is just embarrassing for both parties. It's like, is it blue or green? Well, I remember one time in Kentucky when my father was asked, is it blue or is it green? I remember. My goodness, man.
And there's also power dynamics there as well, because the reporter is afraid, well, if I piss off this politician, I'll never be invited back here again, right? So there's also power dynamics that go in there.
I can imagine there's things like that in play in the background. Also, I like those go-getter reporters, the ones that just don't give a crap, especially the ones that are part of like an independent media.
Yeah.
Very, very. Oh yeah.
They're like kamikaze reporters. They know they're going to ask this question, and they're going to die here. They're going to blow up, and they'll never be invited back. But they're sacrificing their
Gosh darn it, they're going to ask the damn question.
Yes. So okay. So how well the person deals with follow-up questions or scrutiny to their ideas? Are they open to debate? And like I said, I think that, bless you, my friend, bless you. So I like the point that you made, that just because somebody speaks with confidence, that doesn't mean that they're lying. Okay, you can speak with confidence and maybe 95% of your material is truthful. It is definitely within the realm of possibility. But I think that you know that you're following a delusion when you can't question the mantra or the dogma that is being spouted. So if no follow-up questions are allowed, and also you can also tell you can tell a person is unsure of their ideas or they're lying if you ask a follow-up question and you notice irritation in their voice. Okay, like if they seem irritated by your question, it probably means that one, this person is lying to you and you've just spotted a gaping hole in their ship, or two, they haven't thought through their ideas thoroughly and they're kind of embarrassed. They're embarrassed that you found the hole in the ship and they're embarrassed, and they're doing everything in their power to get your eyes away from that hole on the ship.
Yeah. Even
Uh,
if it means screaming and cursing.
Okay, absolutely. Kenny, I don't know if we've completely I don't think we've completely unmasked the world, but I think this is at least a good first aid kit in helping people to start unmasking some of the lies that are swimming around us right now. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Aaron, my good man, thank you for having me. It was a great time and a pleasure.
This concludes the 156th episode of the Truth Island podcast. I'm Aaron Azrod.